In the mid-1990s, Scottish football was rocked by one of its most controversial off-field battles, a story of power, politics, and a football club's relentless pursuit of justice. This is the story of Jim Farry versus Celtic Football Club. Jim Farry was the chief executive of the Scottish Football Association, the SFA, a man known for his authority, his confidence, and his control over the inner workings of Scottish football. But in 1996, he would find himself at the centre of a storm that would pit him directly against one of the biggest clubs in the country, Celtic Football Club. The controversy began over the registration of a player. Celtic had agreed a deal to sign Portuguese striker Jorge Cadete from Sporting Lisbon. But as weeks passed, the transfer wasn't being cleared by the SFA. Manager Tommy Burns and chairman Fergus McCann grew frustrated. Celtic were losing vital matches while the paperwork sat in limbo, and their patience was running out. Then came the revelation. Fergus McCann accused Jim Farry, the head of the SFA, of deliberately delaying Cadet's registration. Why? Because according to McCann, Farry didn't want Cadet eligible to play in an upcoming Scottish Cup semi-final against Rangers. The accusation was explosive. It wasn't just about a transfer. It was about fairness, bias and integrity at the very top of Scottish football. The SFA initially backed Farry. They claimed there was no wrongdoing, that it was simply administrative delays. But Fergus McCann refused to back down. He was relentless, determined to prove that Celtic had been treated unfairly. Eventually, the SFA were forced to launch an independent inquiry, and when the findings came out, they were damning. The investigation concluded that Jim Farry had deliberately withheld Cadete's registration. In simple terms, he had blocked the player from joining Celtic in time. The result? Jim Farry was dismissed from his position as chief executive of the Scottish Football Association in 1999. It was a rare and stunning moment in Scottish football, the head of the SFA being sacked for misconduct. For Celtic and for Fergus McCann, it was a moment of vindication. They had stood up to the establishment and won. But the scandal left deep scars. It raised serious questions about transparency, accountability and fairness in Scottish football, questions that still echo decades later. Jim Farry would never again hold a major role in football. Fergus McCann's persistence changed the way the SFA handled club relations forever, and for Celtic fans. The story of Jim Farry and the Jorge Cadete affair remains a symbol of how one club's fight for fairness reshaped the landscape of Scottish football. After years of frustration, confrontation and suspicion, Fergus McCann finally got what he had been fighting for. In 1999, Jim Farry, the man at the very top of Scottish football, was found guilty of misconduct and dismissed from his position as chief executive of the SFA. For Celtic and for their fiery, determined chairman, it was vindication. Justice. At last. When the news broke, the football world was stunned. An SFA chief executive sacked for deliberately blocking a player's registration. It was unheard of in Scotland. Fergus McCann, never one to hide his feelings, made his position clear. He said publicly, "This is not about vengeance. It's about fairness. It's about ensuring that no club is treated unjustly again." His words echoed across the media, calm but firm. He had taken on the football establishment, and he had won. Behind the scenes, many within the SFA were uneasy. Farry had been part of the old guard, the traditional power structure of Scottish football. McCann's battle had exposed cracks in that system, cracks that could no longer be ignored. Celtic supporters saw McCann not just as a chairman, but as a man who refused to be pushed around. He had already saved the club from financial collapse, rebuilt Parkhead into a modern stadium, and demanded higher standards on and off the pitch. Now he had gone even further. He had forced accountability at the highest level. The Scottish media divided quickly. Some praised McCann for standing up to corruption and secrecy. Others accused him of arrogance, of being too blunt, too confrontational. But McCann didn't care. He wasn't there to be liked. He was there to make things right. At a press conference following Farrie's dismissal, McCann spoke directly to the cameras. He said, "We were told to be quiet. We were told to accept it. But I would not accept wrongdoing against Celtic Football Club. Not from anyone." That moment captured everything Fergus McCann stood for: courage, conviction, and the refusal to be silenced. In the years that followed, many would look back on the Farrie affair as a turning point in Scottish football. It marked the end of an era of unchecked authority, and the beginning of one where clubs demanded transparency. Farrie quietly disappeared from public life, his reputation forever damaged. Fergus McCann, meanwhile, would eventually step away from Celtic, having delivered a new stadium, financial stability, and a restored sense of pride. To this day, older Celtic fans remember that era with a sense of pride, not just for the trophies or the players, but for the principle that no one, not even the head of the SFA, was above fairness and accountability. Fergus McCann once said, "You must always stand up for what's right even when you stand alone." And that's exactly what he did. This was the story of Jim Farrie versus Celtic Football Club. Thanks for watching and subscribe to Cel 88.